labor movement going to topple the people in power and make a giant difference in this country? Well, let's find out. Former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, current TYT contributor as well, joins us because she's got a new group. We are somebody. I love that saying. I'm never not going to love that saying. Nina, welcome.
Thank you, Cenk. So good to be here with you on The Conversation.
Okay, so I'm gonna find out. So this is about labor. It's about the labor movement and how you're gonna support it. But before I ask you questions, I wanna play the promo video because it's fun. Okay, so let's roll that video and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Everybody is somebody. Most people want the ability to afford housing, healthcare, provide for their family, and be able to take a vacation every now and then. While most corporations are seeing record profits, they aren't leading to record wages. Imagine that. CEO pay has skyrocketed over 1,000% since 1978. CEOs are paid 399 times as much as a typical worker. Workers deserve better. From the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. supporting sanitation workers in Memphis, to Fannie Lou Hamer's work for black farmers in the South, to Asa Philip Randolph's work organizing the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and organizing the March on Washington, the fight for liberation has always been a fight for workers' rights.
All right, I love it. And you're gonna give Jim Cramer at CNBC a heart attack with all this labor stuff. I remember we did this on Young Turks the other day, where they had a segment on CNBC where they're like, the American people looks like they're on the side of the workers in the car industry. I mean, they got all these nice cars and they won't even thank the executives. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Anyways, okay,
yeah, they were.
So go ahead, Nina.
I mean, Cramer is definitely living in an alternative universe. I mean, I thought his head was going to explode when they saw the polling.
Oh, totally.
Where the American people are.
Like when he found out that they were not with the CEOs, which how could you be surprised by that? I'm a CEO. And I'm not surprised by that. I mean, you'd be crazy to be surprised by that, right? And Cramer's like all sullen. He's like, oh. Anyways, so how are you going to make Cramer more sad? Tell us.
Yeah, make his head explode. Well, We Are Somebody is a capacity building organization for the working class. And Cenk, you and I have certainly been in politics for a long time now, supported people, we run ourselves, and you look electorally and not a whole lot gets done, especially on the federal level. And I'm thinking to myself, what are some of the things that we, the people, can do with or without good elected officials? Now, don't get me wrong, we do need elected officials that really are gonna put the people who they are supposed to serve first. But if we wait on that, not much will get done. And I really do believe that the bright light, like the light at the end of the tunnel or at the beginning of the tunnel, I should say, is dealing with labor. And the House of Labor is showing us that they are not waiting for politicians to get it right, that they are making a demand for better wages, for better work conditions, and better benefits. And as the House of Labor continues to do that, as we can see, and Cramer knows, they are galvanizing the American people to their side. So whether it's the UAW or any other labor unions, the support for labor is extraordinarily high, and it hasn't been this high over the last 50 years. So we are in a great moment to continue to push and bolster the needs of working class people. And one other point I want to make, Cenk, this is not just for those who are in unions. It is a beautiful thing. The labor union, the labor movement, as we talk about it, we're often talking about unions, and that is the best place to galvanize people because they're already organized. But We Are Somebody seeks to bring union and non-union workers. When we say workers, we really do mean all workers, understanding very clearly that when members of labor unions stand up and they go on strike and they fight the power, that has a ripple effect for every other worker in this country. The majority of workers are not in a union, but they benefit when unions stand up.
Yeah, that's the same argument I make about higher minimum wage. If that gets to $15, it pushes everybody else's wages up, and we all get higher wages, and so that makes sense. And I like the way you're using the House of Labor makes me think like House Baratheon has showed up, and you don't want to mess with the House of Labor because they got some workers there, and they'll work you over. And so that's the America I want to go back to, where workers' rights are represented and strong. And so, all right, so let's talk about the how. What are the different ways that We Are Somebody can help workers in this country?
Well, amplify, organize, and fund. I mean, those are our three major pillars. And we do have on our website, wearesomebody.org, we have a portal for labor unions to go on, and they can fill out a form to tell us exactly what they need and how we can be helpful. We have an understanding about how we can be helpful, but we want to hear from each individual labor union or group of workers who may want our help. And many have reached out to us already. I mean, we're fielding those applications, which is a beautiful thing. And I get all kinds of messages on LinkedIn saying, hey, I heard about this and we could use your help. So in terms of organizing, just to accentuate, I mean, if you have the UAW, for example, I mean, they're very organized, 145,000 members strong. They might not need as much help as, say, a Christian Smalls with the Amazon Labor Union because they're just getting started, or Saru, who runs the One Fair Wage campaign that is taking place all over this country, where that organization is putting ballot initiatives on, putting initiatives on ballots in states where that is allowed to do away with the sub minimum wage. And so you mainly have restaurant workers there, and most restaurant workers are not in the union. So we can go from that spectrum to helping members of the House of Labor who are very well organized and seasoned. They've been in existence for a very long time, to very new and young and burgeoning labor unions like Amazon Labor Union, to Starbucks, to restaurant workers and others. Organize, fund, and amplify those messages. I went to two so far for UAW. I went to Streetsboro, Ohio, right here in my own backyard. It's a parts plant, 122, I think, workers there. They've been on strike for about 3 weeks. They were on that rolling strike, as you know, and President Fain is doing such a wonderful job in doing that and standing side by side with them. And then recently I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that was Local 75. And I was with those workers as well. And just listening to their stories, Cenk, I mean, they are really only getting about $500 a week. They get their healthcare coverage paid because the UAW has such a robust strike fund. But if they had to deploy that strike fund for 145,000 employees, even though they have over $800 million, if they had to deploy that all at once, it would only last for about 3 months.
That's super interesting. I did not know those specific facts. So let's talk about Amazon Labor Union in specific. Like, how can We Are Somebody work with them to strengthen their cause?
Well, the technical support that they need, they are a new, they're at the genesis of this labor, of being a union. And even though they have been recognized by the National Labor Relations Board, they can't collect dues right now. So We Are Somebody is partnering with Christian Smalls, his board, and the members that he represents to try to help bolster funds for them so that he can carry out the mission, to help them with tech support, for example, website, making sure that the administrative staffing is such that they can actually carry out, so that they can continue to fight. It is really about leverage. So those are the types of things that we will be doing with Christian Smalls and his team. And we are very excited about being able to help them where they need it most, to help build and forge relationships with more seasoned labor unions, the unions that have been around for a very long time. We want to be a bridge for the Amazon Labor Union because those labor unions have the capacity to be able to help enhance what Christian Smalls is trying to do. So those are just a few of the things that we will do in working with him.
Right, all right. And then at least one more thing here, which is legislation. Of course, at the end of the day, getting legislation passed, PRO Act, higher wages, et cetera, makes a giant difference to the country. So how do we help get that right legislation passed?
Well, first of all, dealing as much on the local, regional, and state levels as we can, where we can, as we continue to push the federal government to do what it should have already done. So in terms of legislative advocacy, we will be right there. We are working with One Fair Wage right now. They have several ballot initiatives across the country. Ohio is one such state. So partnering with them to help to collect the signatures, to help push the initiative to get Ohioans and where they are in other states to vote for that, to do away with the sub minimum wage. So in short, we will be involved in ballot initiatives, and we also will be involved in trying to push the federal government to do right by the workers in this country. And you bring up a very important point, Cenk, which is we can be out there in the streets and we have lots of leverage. We can get these things done. Ultimately, though, to complement what the gains that workers are able to produce on their own by their sheer grit and will, because they're not waiting on elected officials. The other side of that, though, the movement has to understand that ultimately the goal is to get legislation, to get policies passed so that working class people don't have to go it alone, that there are policies in place. I want people to think Civil Rights Act. I want them to think Voting Rights Act. Those are the kinds of things. Think that way. So there was people on the ground, right, pushing this country to do the right thing. I'm using those two as two examples. There are many other examples that you and I can share, but think about that. In the streets, pushing, trying to make this happen in communities all across this country, ultimately, though, needed the federal government to act. And that is what we must do in real time right now in the 21st century. The PRO Act must pass. And there are other things that the federal government can do, like let's restore the enhanced child tax credit, shall we? Those are things that must be done that no individual can do alone. But no, it's not a but, and it is very helpful though to see the House of Labor out there shaking it up and letting politicians know they're just not gonna wait for them to do what they know is right, that workers are gonna get out there and make a demand. But I believe, Cenk, and I would love to hear how you feel about that, that there is a synergy that goes along with what is happening in the streets and what we can make happen in legislative bodies.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So look, national legislation is super hard, but we've got to push, and there are moments when it is possible, including $15 minimum wage at the beginning of Biden's term was possible. Yes. And so those are moments that if a group like We Are Somebody had already existed and had already collaborated with a lot of the House of Labor, if you will, and brought people together, then you could have made an impact at that crucial time to get
things. Right.
And because these things don't happen without organization, and nobody knows that better than the unions and the labor movement. And so I love that you're organizing, but even more so, Nina, you made a great point about ballot measures. Ballot measures are not that hard to pass. You just got to get them proposed. They cost some degree of money and volunteers, et cetera, to get them proposed, but then they pass relatively easily when they're in favor of workers' rights, higher wages, et cetera. Right. So, and I know from, like, there's ones in California, and next time around should be one sponsored by Joe Sandberg that brings minimum wage to $18 in California. But meanwhile, and that one's polling at like in the 70s. So it's almost definitely gonna pass if it gets on the ballot. And then in Ohio, I know the minimum wage is $7.25. That's still or right around that ballpark.
We're a little higher.
We're a little higher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like
not much.
Not much higher than the national minimum wage is $7.25. I think last I looked it up, it was like $7.85 or something ridiculously low, right? And so when you have a situation like that, we've seen a higher minimum wage passes a ballot measure in Missouri, Arkansas, Florida, and each time with sky high numbers. So
that's right.
Nina, can you, is there a way to go to the picket lines to talking about the synergy that you brought up, right? And say, hey, not only are we here to support the workers in Ohio that are striking, but by the way, we can push for higher wages with this ballot measure. So let's do both together.
Yeah, it is, Cenk, and that is really what the goal of We Are Somebody is, to get the House of Labor with its power in its organization to understand that it is on the precipice. It is the catalyst, if you will, for all other things that lift working class people. So it's not just about the individual strike of the UAW or the potential of that strike with the UPS, the Teamsters. It's not just about that. The Kaiser workers, 75,000 healthcare workers have walked off the job. Teachers are striking. You name it. In every industry in this country, somebody is striking. But it is about that force that they bring to bear that we then can wrap other important issues around it that impact so many more working class people. And the examples that you gave, Florida was one that I was gonna give because I want our viewers to remember that Trump won Florida, but so did the increase for the minimum wage. I mean, if that is not a juxtaposition, if that is not two opposite things happening at the same time, it is just a beautiful example of what absolutely is possible when the question is called to the people of these various states. And inevitably, most of them are gonna vote themselves a raise, because that's basically what we're asking them to do, Gene.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. And by the way, that is how democracy is supposed to work. And the guys who tell you, oh no, that's, you can't just buy voters by telling them, by giving them stuff. Oh yeah, well, how about your donors? You get them all the time by giving them billions and trillions of dollars in tax cuts and all sorts of subsidies and goodies. And so if you can, do favors for your donors, we can do favors for the voters. That's how democracy is actually supposed to work. And you're absolutely right. Florida and all those other states passed overwhelmingly, like almost all of them passed by over 20 points. So, and that, by the way, guys, the last part of that I need you to absorb is that a lot of the Republican voters are also on our side. They're also workers. You just need to get them information that there's someone on their side, that they're part of the House of Labor, and that we could fight this together and win together despite partisan differences. So
yes, that is so beautiful. Can we just rest there for just a moment? Because that is why I'm so excited about We Are Somebody, because this is the space where people who are working in factories, for example, take any blue collar worker, where they're standing side by side with somebody that voted for Sanders or Biden or Clinton or Obama, or Trump, side by side. But what do they have in common? Politically, they may have nothing in common, but what they do have in common from an economic perspective is that they catching hell at their workplace, and they're not making a living wage, and it's hard to make ends meet, and they got to work extra jobs just to even try to survive, let alone get to thrive. They have that in common, and so they push aside all the political dynamics that people in the bubble talk about to say we catching the same kind of hell, and so we gonna stand shoulder and shoulder to ensure that we don't catch it. That we fight like hell. So we catching hell, we're gonna fight like hell to change our work conditions. That is it. I think that is the beautiful part of what We Are Somebody can help bring to bear and to get the House of Labor, because part of that is also being a bridge and also educating, reminding the House of Labor that it has more than just the responsibility to ensure that its members, as we were saying, as we were giving the examples of what can be put on the ballot, but they have a responsibility, and many of them understand that too, to lift up all workers. And there are various ways that that can be done, but that is the sweet spot of bringing people from different political ideologies together based on what they have in common.
Yep. All right. So everybody check out wearesomebody.org. Bring the House of Labor together. Senator Nina Turner leading the proceedings. Love it. Thank you for joining us, Nina. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.